Every night, just as the clock struck midnight, the puppy named Max would sit in the living room, staring intently at the old, worn-out chair in the corner, and start barking with a strange, desperate intensity. At first, the family thought it was just a phase, maybe a shadow or a trick of the light. But as the nights dragged on, Max's barking grew louder, more frantic, almost heart-wrenching. His small body would tremble, his tail stiff, his eyes locked onto the empty chair with a focus that was almost unimaginable. The family couldn't believe what they were seeing. Max, who had always been the calmest, happiest little puppy, now acted as if something, or someone, invisible was sitting there. It was horrifying to watch. The air around the chair often felt heavier, colder, sending shivers down their spines. The children started refusing to enter the living room after dark. The mother found herself locking the bedroom door at night, heart pounding at every creak of the house. Even the father, who never believed in anything beyond reason, admitted he felt uneasy. What was it about that old chair? Why did Max, their beloved puppy, bark at it every single night as if trying to warn them about something they couldn't see? Little did they know, the truth would break their hearts. Max wasn't just a puppy. He was the heartbeat of the Johnson family. From the moment he padded into their lives, a tiny bundle of fur with wide, trusting eyes, he had wrapped each member of the family around his little paw. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson had adopted Max from a local shelter just a few months ago, hoping to bring a little more happiness into their home after a long, difficult year. And happiness is exactly what Max delivered. He had trusted them since the very first day, nuzzling into their arms as if he had been waiting for them his entire life. Their two children, Ellie and Ben, adored him. Every morning, Max would greet them with excited jumps and wagging tail, running circles around their feet until they couldn't help but laugh. Every evening, he would curl up beside them on the couch, pressing his tiny body against theirs as if promising to protect them from every bad dream. The bond they shared was unbreakable. Max wasn't just a pet, he was family. He celebrated their joys, comforted them in their sadness, and filled their home with a kind of warmth they hadn't even realized was missing. The old chair in the corner had been his favorite spot. It was the place where Grandpa Henry, Mr. Johnson's late father, used to sit every evening, reading books aloud to the kids, sharing stories, and laughing until the house echoed with joy. After Grandpa's passing, the chair had been left untouched, as a small tribute to the man they all missed dearly. Strangely, Max had always seemed drawn to that chair, curling up at its feet as if still listening to the stories, still feeling Grandpa's comforting presence. It was a beautiful, silent connection until the night the barking began. It was a chilly Friday night when the first strange incident happened. The house had settled into its usual comforting silence. Ellie and Ben were tucked into their beds, Mrs. Johnson was folding laundry, and Mr. Johnson sat reading the newspaper in the living room. Max, who normally slept curled up at the children's bedroom door, suddenly wandered into the living room. His tiny paws made soft padding sounds against the hardwood floor as he approached the old chair. At first, the parents didn't notice. But then, a sharp, startled bark pierced the silence. Both Mr. and Mrs. Johnson looked up, confused. Max stood rigid, just a few feet away from the empty chair, his body tense, ears perked, tail stiff. His eyes were locked onto the worn-out fabric as if seeing something, someone invisible to them. He barked again. Short, urgent barks that echoed eerily in the quiet house. Then he began to growl, a low, warning sound that seemed so out of place coming from the usually cheerful puppy. Mrs. Johnson felt a chill run down her spine. "Max, what is it, boy?" she called softly, but he didn't move his gaze, didn't wag his tail. It was as if he were guarding them from some unseen threat. Mr. Johnson approached cautiously, placing a hand on Max's back to soothe him. The pup's fur bristled under his touch. They exchanged a worried glance. This wasn't a simple bark at a squirrel outside or excitement at a passing car. This was something else, something they didn't understand. Pushing down their unease, they eventually managed to coax Max away from the chair and settle him back near the children's rooms. But that night, long after everyone had gone to bed, Mrs. Johnson lay awake, staring into the dark hallway, her heart heavy with an unshakable feeling. Something was wrong. Night after night, the scene repeated itself. Just as the house slipped into darkness and quiet, Max would rise, walk stiffly to the living room, and bark, loud, sharp, urgent, at the empty, worn-out chair. Each morning, the Johnson family woke up more desperate, more drained. They tried everything to make it stop. First, they thought Max might be sick. Mrs. Johnson bundled him in a blanket and rushed him to the vet. The doctor examined him carefully, checked his heart, his lungs, even his ears and eyes. But Max was declared perfectly healthy. "There's nothing wrong with him physically," the vet said, scratching his head. "He's strong and happy. Maybe he's sensing something you can't." The words sent a shiver down Mrs. Johnson's spine. Determined to find a rational explanation, Mr. Johnson hired a professional dog trainer. The trainer spent hours observing Max, running tests, giving commands. In the daylight, Max behaved perfectly, obedient, joyful, playful. At the end of the session, the trainer sighed and said, "This isn't about behavior. Your dog isn't aggressive or scared. He's trying to tell you something." That night, desperate for answers, the Johnsons installed a camera facing the chair. They sat huddled around the screen, watching live footage as Max approached the chair once again, barking, growling, refusing to back down. But the footage revealed nothing unusual. No movements, no sounds, no flickering lights. Still not giving up, they called in specialists to check the house. Experts came with heavy equipment, searching for gas leaks, carbon monoxide, electrical issues, anything that could explain the puppy's strange reaction. Every test came back clean. The house was safe, the air pure. There was no logical reason for Max's nightly terror. Night after night, Max barked. Night after night, the family sat awake in fear, huddled together, whispering possibilities they were too afraid to say aloud. Was it a ghost? A memory? A warning? They were terrified to think what could be happening, and even more terrified of what might happen if they ignored Max's desperate cries. The once cheerful home now carried a heavy sadness, a question that grew larger with every sleepless night. What was Max trying to protect them from? Days turned into weeks, and with each sleepless night, the weight on the Johnson family's hearts grew heavier. The once joyful home was now filled with fear, whispers, and silent tears. Mrs. Johnson would often sit by the kitchen window at dawn, eyes red and swollen from crying, clutching Max's leash tightly in her trembling hands. She couldn't understand it. Max, who had been their light in the darkest days, was now a source of fear and confusion. The thought of losing him felt unbearable, but so did the thought of putting her children in danger, whatever that danger might be. Mr. Johnson, once so firm and rational, had started to lose hope. He paced the living room late into the night, staring at the old chair, fists clenched, heart torn in two. They never imagined they would have to choose between their beloved pet and their own child's safety. One night, after yet another desperate barking episode, Mr. Johnson quietly said the words no one wanted to hear. Maybe we should find him a new home." The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Ellie and Ben, standing in the doorway, burst into tears, clinging to Max, who whimpered softly, confused by the sadness around him. Mrs. Johnson buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. She had trusted Max since the day he arrived. He had loved and protected them unconditionally. How could she betray that trust? But how could she risk her children's lives? The family stood at an impossible crossroads, and the heartbreak was more than any of them could bear. It happened on a night darker and colder than any before. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the house seemed almost unnaturally still. Max had been pacing all evening, his tiny paws clicking urgently against the wooden floor. His ears twitched, his nose sniffed the air sharply. Something was different tonight, something Max could feel deep in his bones. Suddenly, without warning, he let out a loud, frantic bark, sharper, more desperate than ever before. Mrs. Johnson, jolted awake from a restless sleep, felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She threw off the covers and bolted from the bed. "Max!" she called out into the darkness, fear gripping her voice. But Max wasn't waiting. He was already sprinting towards the living room, barking, growling, whining all at once. His small body launched at the empty chair, pawing and scratching the fabric wildly as if trying to reveal something hidden within. Her heart raced like never before. Mrs. Johnson stumbled after him, tears already blurring her vision, terrified of what she might find. Max turned sharply, barking at her insistently, then sprinted towards Ellie and Ben's shared bedroom. Mrs. Johnson followed, her breath catching in her throat, and that's when she saw it. Smoke. Thin, curling tendrils of smoke leaking out from an electrical socket right beside the children's beds. The old wiring behind the wall had finally given way, sparking and smoldering silently, seconds away from igniting into a deadly fire. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the truth. Max hadn't been warning them about a ghost or some invisible threat. He had been sensing the hidden danger, night after night, trying to alert them before it was too late. Screaming for Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Johnson scooped up Ellie and Ben in her arms, rushing them out of the room as Max barked and tugged at the hem of her nightgown, guiding her through the thickening haze. Mr. Johnson grabbed the fire extinguisher and managed to put out the beginnings of the fire just in time. The entire family huddled outside on the lawn, clutching each other, shaking, crying, overwhelmed by what had almost happened, and by the little hero who had saved them all. Max, their loyal, brave puppy, sat quietly beside them, tail wagging weakly, his eyes shining with unconditional love. As the firefighters arrived and inspected the house, the truth finally came to light, and it left the Johnson family in complete awe. The aging electrical wiring behind the walls had been slowly deteriorating for months. Every night, a faint smell of overheated wires had filled the air, undetectable to human noses but easily sensed by a sharp and loyal puppy like Max. The empty rocking chair placed near the faulty socket had become Max's warning target, the spot he associated with the invisible danger threatening his family. Night after night, Max had been fighting to alert them. Night after night, he stood guard, barking his heart out, trying to protect the ones he loved most. They realized he had never been causing trouble. He had been saving their lives, patiently, desperately, without ever giving up on them even when they doubted him, even when they considered sending him away. Mrs. Johnson collapsed onto the lawn, hugging Max tightly against her chest, her tears soaking his soft fur. Mr. Johnson knelt beside them, his voice cracking as he whispered, "You were trying to save us, Buddy. You were our little guardian angel all along." The fear that had haunted their home was replaced by a deep, overwhelming wave of relief and an even deeper gratitude. If not for Max's stubborn loyalty and love, they might not have made it through that night. From that moment on, Max wasn't just a family dog. He was their hero, their protector, the bravest little soul they could have ever asked for. And no one ever doubted the barking at night again. Not ever. After that terrifying night, nothing in the Johnson household was ever the same again. Max wasn't just their pet anymore, he was their guardian, their protector, their lifesaver. Everywhere he went, Max was followed by gentle hands and loving voices. Ellie made a small golden medal out of cardboard and ribbon that read "Our Hero" and hung it proudly around his neck. Ben, who once tugged playfully at Max's ears, now hugged him tight every morning, whispering, "Thank you for saving us, Max." The whole family moved Max's bed to the center of the living room, right where everyone could see him, their tiny, brave angel always at the heart of their home. They realized that they hadn't just adopted a dog, they had found a guardian angel in fur. Neighbors who heard the story came by with treats and toys. Local children asked to meet the hero dog they had heard about. Even the firefighters returned days later, bringing Max a shiny silver tag engraved with the word, "Protector." Mrs. Johnson often found herself sitting beside Max in the evenings, stroking his fur as he slept peacefully. Sometimes, tears would fill her eyes, not from fear this time, but from an overwhelming gratitude she could hardly put into words. They understood now. Max had sensed danger long before any human could. He had stayed up every night, sleepless and determined, to keep his family safe. He had risked losing the only home he had ever known, just to protect the people he loved. From that day forward, no bark was ever ignored. No growl was ever dismissed. Every sound Max made was a sound of love, a sound of warning, a sound of devotion. Max wasn't just part of their lives. He was the reason they still had one. Their guardian, their hero, their family forever. In a world filled with noise and distraction, it's easy to overlook the quiet signs of love, loyalty, and warning that come from those who cannot speak with words. Animals, in their purest form, carry a sixth sense, a deep, unshakable instinct to protect the ones they call family. Max reminded everyone that night that true loyalty doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes, it comes through a bark in the darkness, a restless paw against a door, a refusal to give up even when no one understands. They aren't just pets. They are silent protectors, brave souls wrapped in fur who would give everything, even their home, even their place in our hearts, just to keep us safe. Max taught the Johnsons, and now all of us, a lesson we must never forget. Always trust the instincts of those who love you most. Because sometimes, the smallest voice in the room is the one screaming the loudest to save you. And sometimes, your guardian angel doesn't have wings. He just has 4 paws and a heart bigger than the world.